I just turned 45 years old, which means I've lived 60.3% of my actuarial lifespan. At 45, I could confidently say I have way less hair, especially if you look back here, but at least I've still held on to my six pack. Now, if you're new to the channel, 10 years ago, I was 35, I left the Wall Street grind and broke free from those golden handcuffs. Yep, I was one of the youngest managing directors at BlackRock, but left so that I could have time freedom, raise my kids, and yes, you got it, surf every day. You can find the full story over here. In this video, I'll share 45 lessons I've learned along the way on workaholism, borderline alcoholism. Yes, how do you cope with those long hours? Taking a huge pay cut, and what to do when you find your favorite t-shirt. But before we jump in, if you're an ambitious professional looking to make a career change, a bold pivot, we have a group coaching program for you. Check out radreads.co/coaching. So 45 lessons at 45 years old. We're going to start with the money category. Number one, it's funny how status symbols change. So I think back in the day where it used to be very high status to be like grotesquely obese, like being really fat was a status symbol, right? And then I think back to maybe some of the boomer status symbols like McMansions or many, many cars. And I think of the status symbols today, like being really fit or time freedom or the ability to work remotely, right? Or being asset light. So interesting on how these status symbols change. And it's just a warning. Like if you were chasing like let's say you were chasing, like I want to be really, really fat because that's high status. And then boom, the status symbol changes. Just be careful what you're chasing, right? Number two, 3 phases of wealth. This is something I've been thinking about a lot, right? So if you think about 3 phases, there is accumulation phase, a maintenance phase or harvesting phase, and a decumulation phase, right? And you would think that accumulation basically goes until retirement, so 60. Harvesting probably goes like active retirement when you're, traveling and stuff. So maybe like 60, mid 50s to 60s, where you're just kind of not growing your pie anymore, but maybe it's staying the same. And then decumulation, when you start to really lose your physical and mental capabilities. Now, I've taken that playbook and have totally reversed it. So I had a very high accumulation phase up until age 35. And from 35 to 45, so the last 10 years have been a harvesting phase where I haven't really grown my net worth. I mean, it's volatile because of the stock market. And if I'm honest with myself, if I'm going to live to be 76, so 30 more years, like I probably could start decumulating now. That's a hard thing to do, which leads to my next point, which is some people don't want to decumulate. Number 3, die with zero is hard. So some people don't want to decumulate. We have chosen as a family to decumulate because we don't really want to create intergenerational wealth. Right? We want to give our kids education, give our kids opportunity. Maybe I've said before, buy them a starter home or help them with a down payment. Even that's an if. But then other than that, we just don't want to leave money behind. So you can start decumulating faster. A lot of the accumulation is posited on the belief that you want to leave intergenerational wealth. So die with zero is something that Lisa and I have bought into. It's not really zero, but let's say 0.25x. Die with 25% of your peak earnings, maybe, or your peak net worth. That hurts the ego though, because if you are a person that likes to see things go up, your streaks, your step count, the number of days you've meditated, the number of books you've read in a year, you want to see it go up. When you start seeing something go down, especially, when others are some people are going to play the legacy game. Their number is going to go up until like Warren Buffett, he's going to die at the peak of his number. Right. And so it's just an ego hit that I don't think people fully appreciate. But once you can let go of that, there's a lot of freedom, right, in starting that decumulation phase early. All right. Number 4, I wrote about this earlier. Not checking your net worth is weird. This is all related, but about 18 months ago, I said, I'm just not going to check anymore. And my asset picture is simple enough that you could keep track of it on a spreadsheet, complicated enough that there's enough levers, enough different accounts that it's just hard to keep track of. And so I actually don't know. I know it's up significantly because of the prices of stock markets and crypto. But besides that, I don't know. And I wish I could say it was freedom. That's the plan. Is I want to really detach from that number. That number, I think, is really poisonous for people listening to this podcast because it embeds competition, it embeds self-worth, it embeds so many things into it. And I want to let go of that. But I've found that I've tried to, without like looking at all the statements, and I look at some of the core accounts. Without looking at all the statements, I'm trying to piece the net worth number back together. Number 5, compounding is insane. So I've been invested in the stock market since I was 17 years old. And I was looking at some of the gains, and it looks like close to 2/3 of my net worth is just capital gains, unrealized capital gains, which is wild at 45 years old, 2/3. A big part of that is because I haven't had meaningful income in the last decade. But I would imagine in like 20 years, like 80% of it will be capital gains because effectively I'm living off of my income. And so everything is just the whatever stays, persists, and grows is capital gains. So just a wild thought that like at some point, 70, 80, 90% of our net worth will be all in capital gains. Number 6, I wish I'd discovered margin earlier. Now, this was when I left BlackRock, I think since I left BlackRock, the market has tripled, I think. I can't remember if it's 200 or 300%. Well, my net worth has not changed by that. It's basically unchanged, up a little bit if I had to guess. And part of the reason was because I held a lot of cash. And I started to use margin basically as a bridge. I have some kind of carry trades on. So if you're not familiar, I borrow at one rate against my stock portfolio and then invest in private funds that have a slightly higher rate. So you basically net the difference. But margin, I run about 10% margin. It's so safe from any meltdown, right? The stocks would have to fall by 90% for me to get a margin call overnight. I sleep fine at night, and it's just a little extra portfolio juice that lets me be 110% invested. I don't keep any cash. I just kind of draw margin, use dividends, and use the income from RadReads. Number 7, healthcare outside of a corporate entity when your spouse doesn't have a W-2 job is terrifying. It's not even, the cost is insane. I think we have a high deductible plan, and I think it's $1,700 a month for 16,000 deductible, which means we pay the first 16,000 out of pocket. So 1,700 times 12, you're looking at almost like over $20,000 post-tax out of pocket expense. But the problem isn't the cost; it's the access. A lot of healthcare providers, doctors, specialists don't want to take Obamacare, ACA plans. It's been a real source of stress and a legitimate concern. I know many people refrain from entrepreneurship because they don't want that concern. Okay, number 8, money worries are not rational. Oof, this is a powerful one. And what I'll say to this is, I know through my work, through my coaching, through my peer group, people who have 10, 20, $500 million, and they still worry about money. Like, can you imagine having $50 million and worrying about money? Well, I actually can, because I've seen it. And I know people might look at our financial situation and be like, why would you ever worry about money? And I wouldn't say I worry about money. I used to worry about money all the time. And so I think about it this way: is imagine you gave someone a spreadsheet and you gave them all these spreadsheets. Like these are 15 spreadsheets that show you why you're never going to run out of money. If they're scared of running out of money, the spreadsheets aren't going to change it. So that leads to this interesting question that we'll talk about later in the self section. How do you overcome that if a spreadsheet is not going to help you? Number 9, simplicity is peace. Like we love renting. It's just problem, call the landlord. We don't overthink on make customizing our house. We've had the same car for 5 years. Simplicity is peace, and peace is happiness. And as I get older, the whole biggie thing, more money, more problems, is rings so true that you buy more stuff. Like I have a a lot of my friends with EVs. We have a gas car because it's old. We'll probably get a hybrid, but especially in the early days, they were always worried about charging their car. Like they would leave dinner and be like, I got to go charge the car. And it's like, this is a mental tax. And look, the Teslas are good for the environment, and our gas powered car is not, but it's still, there's something about that simplicity, right? Okay. Number 10, with age, things get cheaper. Okay. So I think about the things I enjoy doing now at 45 years old. The biggest expense is travel. We eat out way less. I drink way less. So even when we eat out, eating out costs way less. Travel is a major expense. I would say self-care, therapists, healers, coaches. That's a huge spend for us. But if I think about the things, I surf 40 minutes a day. I meditate 40 minutes a day. I surf 90 minutes a day. I walk, talk on the phone. I read. I've started to make music. You can see this MIDI controller here. That's I stretch. I watch TV with my kids. Things definitely feel like getting cheaper, especially once we think about, we don't really want a second home. We'll rent place and we'll take a lot of trips, but that second home with a second car and the second set of stuff, to go back to the simplicity equals peace, and things just get cheaper. All right, so those were 10 lessons on money. Now we're going to jump into lessons on career. Number 11. I'm glad I worked really hard in my 20s. I worked very hard. I worked extremely hard from age, teenage years, college years, but professional years, 21 to 35. 100 hours the first couple of years. The steady state was probably 70. And I'm glad I did that. It gave us an incredible financial base. It got me promoted, so it set up a lot of future opportunities. But most importantly, the opportunity cost was not so bad in my 20s and 30s. I stopped all this once I had a child, but yes, I made sacrifices, mental health sacrifices, health sacrifices, high blood pressure, type 2, prediabetes. We've talked about that. But and I don't want to dismiss sleeping 6 hours a night. I don't want to dismiss the health sacrifices. But besides those, just being pretty frugal, working extremely hard, not having a ton of hobbies, never sacrificing on relationships and friendships. But I'm glad, because that compounding at 20, there's some crazy statistic where it's like someone invests the same amount from 20 to 30, but someone starts from 30 to 40, but they're investing the same dollar amount. And if you look at it at 60, the change is gigantic because of the compounding that we talked about earlier. Number 12, labels do matter. And specifically, I'm talking about my managing director title. In hindsight, I'm glad that I did not resign when I was a director. I'm glad I got that managing director title. If you're not in finance, managing director is the highest title. It is and it isn't, because I don't know, a firm like BlackRock probably had 1,000 managing directors at any given point in time. But the thing is, the titles above that, there's obviously the C-suite, which is extremely hard. There's committees, there's subtitles like your portfolio manager or this. But the reality is that no one cares about the nuance of the title. So you could be a managing director for one day, right? It would be like being a partner at Goldman Sachs for one day. And look, I started earlier with the point about status, but these things matter, and the doors open for you, invitations to conferences, different opportunities to make money, coaching, and so on. things where peer status matters, reputation matters. And so I'm really glad. I don't think I fully appreciated this until later in my journey. I'm like, wow, that's something that they can't take away. And by the way, no one goes in. It's just like MD, right? Like Steve Schwartzman from Blackstone is an MD, technically. Khe Hy's an MD. We're the same title. We're fucking not. But again, that nuance doesn't fully get deconstructed by folks. Number 13, I'm not sure I'd recommend an internet career. I think an internet career brings tremendous amount of freedom. It's extremely creative. It's a grind though. And I think it's a grind to just put your life out there. There's the pressure to always be filming. There's the lens that everything you do is content. But more importantly, I think it's actually just not a great business model, right? I think we see the Mr. Beasts, we see the Tim Ferrisses, but again, they are such outliers. Like the average internet creator, I think the top 15% make only 15% make over $50,000, something like that. And like the average is not enough to make a full-time living. So internet career, but I think mostly like if you were to start a supplements business, it's, you create content about supplements, you get really good at supplements, you learn that landscape, you understand who your competitors are. It actually just seems way easier to start a business than to start a business centered around an identity. That leads to lesson 14. It is very hard to make over $500,000 on your own. Right. And I'm talking profit. As you know, RadReads does about 250, 260 in profit a year. So that's double from there. But the reality is, this is if you don't want to have employees, right? If you want to kind of have that solo career. The reality is, if you want to, you could do the math, right? If you want to make $500,000 a year, you start thinking about your billable hours. You start thinking about how many hours you can bill. You start thinking about your billable rate. And then obviously there's so much supporting work, but it's just, and this is something that I didn't realize. It's relatively easy in finance over a certain amount of time to make over seven figures. I thought that would translate into any industry, and I'm seeing very clearly that it does not translate into kind of small business. Particularly, there's a big asterisk here, is if you don't want to have a large team, which is something that at this point in my life, I don't want to have a lot of people who report into me. That leads us to number 15, making an impact, quote unquote, impact is often misguided. People often think that purpose is tied to impact, but then when you ask them, well, what does it mean to make an impact? They'll say something like, they'll pick up one of their favorite causes, like climate change or eradicating, a certain type of cancer, or building a vaccine, creating a vaccine. And I think everyone, especially when you get into this kind of post-achievement phase and you don't need to do things only for money, impact plays a bigger role. But I think when you really drill down to the question of impact, it's just a very nebulous concept, right? So is a middle school math teacher in a low-income neighborhood, are they making more of an impact than Elon Musk, or less of an impact, right? Like I just don't even think you can translate the measure of impact. In some ways, I think impact is very personal, right? Some people think being a good member of their community is making an impact, and it is. And so I think that, when we use impact, especially kind of in this capitalist phrase, it's like, gotta do huge things. And I am so glad that there are people doing huge things out there. I feel very glad that I make an impact on a subset of our listeners' lives. But to think that every activity that one does must be tied to an impact, I think can actually lead you to very dark places. And I've written about this in the past. Number 16, rewrite your success metrics, right? Obviously, a lot of people view success, Arthur Brooks has the four idols. money, power, fame, and pleasure. But what does success look like if you take those away, right? And I think, it's almost like Moneyball, right? Everyone wants to hit home runs and if you're playing baseball, but the real valuable person is the one that can just get on base, even if they just get walked all the time, right? No one distinguishes a walk from a single if you're talking about baseball. And so I think when you think about your success metrics, like one of my proudest success metrics, I missed 40 nights, 40 bedtimes in 10 years. Like no one's high-fiving me about that, but I know that it has an impact. It's very personal. It's something I'm proud of. But again, I'm not getting any trophies. Maybe that tweet gets a few likes. So rethink your success metrics. Number 17, stop turning everything into a challenge. As you see here, I have a MIDI controller. So I'm learning how to make music as a 45-year-old. Shout out to my teacher, Keller. But what I found is, so I'm a total beginner, total beginner. And making music is one of those 10,000 hours activities. But I had my first lesson, and in my head I said, when can I get a production credit? Which is basically your music gets used in like a pop, a record. That's like going for one run and being like, when can I run in the national championships? Right. But then when I take the goal away, then it feels a little like, well, why am I doing this? And so I think that that not turning everything into a challenge is a challenge, but some things you're just meant to suck at some things, and that is okay. Number 18, complex productivity systems are stressful. Now, you have heard plenty of videos and talks of me talking about GTD, talking about Notion, talking about weekly reviews, talking about 10K work. And I've come to believe that a lot of this is just complicating things for the purpose of feeling productive versus being productive. And I have found that if you have good habits, a simple to-do list, and some kind of introspective practice where you just check in on yourself, you're good. Which leads to 19. Time freedom is overrated. So I was thinking about this. One of the greatest joys of leaving Wall Street was that I got time freedom. Right. So at 35, up until 35, I never had time freedom. And at 35 years old, I had complete time freedom. No one could tell me where to be. I could take extended periods of time off. And it's amazing. It is. However, it's not the end game. Right? Because once you have time freedom, there's a lot of problems that aren't cured by time freedom. Like, let's say you have very low self-esteem, or you are scared to put yourself out there, or you have a problematic relationship with a family member, or you have some kind of addiction challenge, or you are an anxious person, right? Now, I know what you're going to say. You can say, well, with time freedom, then you can go hire a therapist. This is true. And if getting rid of one of those things, those challenges that I talked about, were a priority, you would have done it before. Right? Like people who are busy still exercise, right? Because they value exercise. So if you valued the relationship that was problematic, then you would have tried to mend it before you had time freedom. And this hits double hard for people who are very ambitious. Like I work with a lot of exited founders, and they just grind their whole life, and then they turn 40 years old, they sell their company. Time freedom, financial freedom, and they are miserable because there's all these feelings that they're feeling that they can't hide anywhere. Like you used to be able to say, well, when I have time freedom, then I'll I'll improve this relationship. When I have a lot of money, then I will focus on my mental health, right? It never works that way. And then it backfires because you have no excuse then, right? And I've seen a lot of people just go back to work because they can't accept that. Number 20, a more playful one: Kindle books or paper books. I have bought two of so many. I really, really want to enjoy paper books. I love the tactile element of it. I can visually see things and remember things better. But the reality is the pragmatism of a Kindle is so, so high. I'm leaning more towards Team Kindle, but God, I miss paper books. Also, my eyesight's getting worse. So Kindle helps with the grandpa font. Number 21, where you live matters. And this is where I just got to give a shout out to living in Southern California, which definitely doesn't have that same creative intellectual energy as the East Coast. But between the weather and the proximity to the beach, I mean, your happiness is a big function of your happiness is your lived experience. And when your lived experience, especially if you love being outdoors, is ocean, good weather, like not a lot of elements. I know there's that Baz Luhrmann song, "It Makes You Soft," but God dang, living in California has made me so happy. I miss New York like crazy, but we still go back often enough. Number 22, go find places where your status doesn't matter. I think about this often because we talked about the MD thing. Like there are places where, so in my town, being an MD, there's enough finance people, they know what that means. They know the status that it confers. You're smart, you're probably well off, you're probably hardworking, you're probably a serious person. But when I go surfing, no one gives a fuck. When I do volunteer work, no one gives a fuck. And there's something really incredible about, especially if you live in New York, where it's just so intense. Everyone's like, oh, this person's a VP of this, and this person has carry, and this person is Jeep, owns part of the hedge fund. Like it just is this ongoing calculation. It's fucking crazy. I feel it even when I go back, even though I'm opted out of the game. And it is just like taking a break from these high status worlds is powerful. And look, I could use my own cooking. I definitely get this. I go to this kind of meatheady gym. No one gives a fuck where I used to work. And then surfing, no one gives a fuck. And it's just cool. It's cool. Then you connect with people at this human level. You don't peacock yourself. They don't expect anything. They don't expect you to act any differently. So that is that. Let me find my page. Okay. All right. We're switching to career. Number 23. You'll never feel like you're on top of things. It's the truth. Highly productive, time freedom. You know why? Because feeling on top of things is a function of how many things you put on your plate, and how many things you put on your plate is a function of how you see yourself. Right? So when things get quieter and there's less on your plate, you're just going to add more. And these are people who are the types of people who are listening. Not everyone does this, just the freaks that listen to this podcast. Number 24, reading. Read more fiction. I spent age 20 to 35, or maybe reading only nonfiction, reading only things that would make me better at my job, that would make me more money, that would make me more skills. And now I probably maybe read like 10 books a year, 12 books a year, 2 nonfiction, 10 fiction. And I think it's like goes back to this, like not everything needs to be, this is kind of a big theme of my 40s. Not everything needs to make you a better person. So not everything needs to be a self-improvement project. And that's a hard thing. I think it kind of goes with that whole decumulation question, why our struggle, but it is hard it's hard to accept that you don't need to improve in everything. Again, this is a certain type of people are wired this way, and they listen to this podcast. All right, let's pivot to health. Number 25, losing your hair sucks. I've shared this story many times. I started to lose my hair, and you're probably like, what? He's losing his hair. Trust me, I go through a lot of work to make sure that it's not obvious to people. But if you know me, you know. What is that? If IYK, YK, if you know, you know. started losing my hair in my 20s, and it's literally been something I've thought about many hours a day for since I was 20, and I'm 45. So yeah, that's not freedom, right? I mean, in the Buddhists would call this, that's a prime example of suffering, right? Which can show that, a lot of things can be going well on the surface, and then, you can have guaranteed 2 hours of suffering a day for 25 years. So it sucks, but I've made some progress there, right? I've really come to love myself for amidst, quote unquote flaws. I mean, it sounds batshit crazy saying out loud, but it is what I feel. I feel like losing my hair, it means that I'm flawed. And when you play that out, it's like, well, if I'm flawed, then, people won't like me, or people won't think I'm good, or people won't want to be around me. And again, it's like that money thing. Intellectually, I know that that's not true, but fundamentally, it's hard to let go of that. Number 26, creatine is awesome. This is out of left field, but I've been reading a lot of the longevity stuff, or maybe not. My friends send me the highlights, but across the board, it seems to be that taking, I think it's 5 grams, like one little spoonful of creatine, is kind of unquestionably a healthy thing. I've been taking creatine. I've gained 15 pounds. So I went from 150 to 165 in 4 months. And I'm pretty sure there's been no change in my body fat. And so that's pure muscle. I mean, water weight and muscle. Strength is through the roof. And I feel great. My recovery is great. And so I can't believe I waited. I mean, that was a nice 44-year-old surprise, was taking creatine. Number 27, understand your coping strategies. If you are a driven and hardworking person, you probably cope a lot. Coping can be alcohol, weed, pornography, video games, chocolate, salty foods, savory foods, other forms of addiction. And what I've started to realize is that I have coped a lot. Alcohol was a big cope for me. Alcohol and work are 2 big copes, which is actually funny because work is a cope. Why is work a cope? Well, because if you're feeling something, like you don't like the fact that you're losing your hair, and you're like, well, I hate that fact about myself, I'm going to work really hard so that I don't think about it. That's not a long-term healthy play. Look, I did that for 25 years, or 15, 20, however you want to measure it. That's not a good long-term strategy, right? And the thing about work is that everyone around you will then put you on a pedestal. Be like, this person's so hard work. Can you believe he works on it? Everyone is out on the beach and this person's working. If there's something that's celebrated in America or in Western culture besides celebrities, it's business people, right? And so business people are very high status. So if you work hard, people will point to you, be like, this person's hardworking. He must be high status. Number 28, on health. Back pain comes at you fast. Now, I'm touching wood here. Here's some wood knocking. I know many of our dear listeners, a lot of our friends are listening to this. Man, it seemed like somewhere between 42 and 45 was when the back problems started to hit people. And again, thankfully, that hasn't impacted me. I've been stretching and strengthening my lower back a lot in advance of this. But if you're younger and listening to this, pay attention to your lower back. The back problems are definitely in full effect in my peer group. Number 29, alcohol will wane over time. You have heard me talk about my relationship with alcohol extensively, and I've come to the point, I've taken a long enough break and then started to drink again, but a long enough break where the habit, the cope is not as, the satiation relative to the cope is not as powerful anymore. Meaning that I'm feeling something that I don't want to feel and I drink, it doesn't relieve it as much as it used to. It's kind of lost its power over me. And then the flip side of it is that it's the opportunity cost of being hungover or just even drinking is much more clear. And so I feel like that will naturally wane. One of my friends, Derek Haswell, podcast guest, said, if you do a lot of work, inner work, like eventually that relationship with alcohol will resolve itself and it will get to a healthy place. And I never thought that would be possible. I love drinking. Drinking was such a big part of my identity, but I can definitely see that happening. Number 30, an easy way to relieve stress, breathing. A simple, you might think I was going to say box breath, but it's even simpler. 4 breath inhale and a 6 breath exhale. I try to do this during calls, during long meetings. I'm not in that many long meetings. What am I talking about? Meetings, things where I kind of have to pay attention and I might be losing focus. 4 breaths in, 6 breaths out. Super powerful. I taught my 10-year-old this and she's really been using it. I can already see some of the preteen anxiety coming in. Number 31, let's flip over to relationships. It is possible to spend too much time with your kids. I know that maybe this registers as a controversial opinion. I think that, for me, probably like 2 to 3 hours a day is probably the most. Like sitting around the house. Like obviously if we're on vacation or like going out somewhere. But it feels like 2 to 3 hours is a good number. And everyone's going to have a different perspective on this. But one thing I'll say is that I've talked to many people and they have said that that's kind of their perspective. And the reality is, like, if you have a full-time job, you probably have 2 to 3 hours with your kids every day. The problem is that they're not good hours. You're tired, you're distracted, you're on your phone. But I say this because you don't need to quit your job, right? If you quit your job, you still might only want 2 to 3 hours with your kids. So then you'll need another job. So again, it kind of ties in with that time freedom point. Number 32, marital problems emanate from a strange source. What's that source? Childhood. And without getting into too much details, I'm still wrangling Lisa to get on the podcast as a guest one of these days. But I have observed this in many relationships, in ours in particular, that there is a child in me that needs certain things, right? And in my case, it's a child that needs to be seen and need to be validated and need to be told that they're special and need to be like reaffirmed that they're worthy of love, right? And then in your spouse, there might be a completely different child, right? Maybe that they want to be let's see, like different love language, like they want you to do stuff for them, or maybe they want you to be spiritually aligned with them. Maybe they want you to be a catalyst for them, right? And so when you have everyone listening to this who's married has these like recurring marital fights, usually it's the kids that need it. It's like some need of the kids that is fighting with the need of the other kid, which is actually what makes marital problems so challenging. It's hard to even know for yourself that this is happening, let alone two kids fighting. Number 33, make seeing your friends a priority. This is a huge one, I think. I have seen many, many peers, many men in particular, just lose touch with friends during this like young kids age. Everyone gets busy with work friends first. And to the point that like scheduling things out months, weeks in advance, those are some of my happiest moments. Number 34, I will continue to be a puppy dog parent. My daughters, they gave me the best compliment. My 7-year-old said, "Daddy, why are you always so excited to see us?" And that's the energy I want to bring to parenting, not in a insincere way, not in a trying way, but just God damn it, I love fucking being your dad. That is puppy dog parenting. Number 35, we're moving into self. Another fun one. When something fits really well, buy 3 of them. right? I've got these shirts that I like, these t-shirts, they're $68. Velva Sheen, they're this old American brand. I just buy 3 at a time, right? And they ain't cheap, but it's probably one of the things I splurge on the most. Rag and Bone jeans, I like the ultras, like slim too. I think there's the second skinniest fit. By the way, skinny jeans are out. Every single pair of jeans I own is skinny, has been tailored, or are these perfect Rag and Bone jeans. I'm not ready to wear baggy cargo pants. I don't know if I can pull that off, but then again, I also like to stay with the trends. Number 36, happiness is found in the everydayness. I think Naval Ravikant said, if you're not happy drinking your coffee, you're not going to be happy on the yacht. And I've found through talking to so many successful people who have time freedom and financial freedom, what they've found is like being at peace. Like that's why you always hear like some of the happiest people are gardeners, right? Just it's not the fancy trips around the world, the great dinners. It is washing the dishes. It is making, that's the whole make your bed thing. There's just something about the finding joy, satisfaction in the everydayness. Number 37, projection is a powerful teacher, right? If you project things onto others, you know, you're like, oh, well, this person's probably not happy because he's rich, but he's probably not happy. There's always a lesson there. I know that there are a few people that kind of rub me the wrong way, and like because they're know-it-alls, right? I'm like, what is it about know-it-alls? Like, why do I feel this way about know-it-alls? Is, well, you know what? Guess who's kind of a know-it-all? Yours truly. And so it's this projection is this mirror. Number 38, envy still has a tight grip on me. Yeah, you can opt out of a game like Wall Street, a game where the stakes are not the stakes, but the financial rewards are so high. You have an average career on Wall Street for 20 years, you're going to leave with 5, 10 million bucks, right? And that's average, right? Let me say above average. But that's not being a rock star. And I think, if I think about that last statement of projections, like, well, what do they have that I don't have? Right. And it's not, I've lived long enough to know it's not the material things, with the exception of a few here and there. But there's something about the self-worth question, right? Something about that self-worth question. Number 39, fixing the leaky bucket. How to fix a leaky bucket. The leaky bucket is this theory that it's not theory, a metaphor that ambitious people driven people are like leaky buckets. And so you pour ambition into the bucket. Water is ambition, and you fill it up. But because of the hole in the bucket, you need to keep pouring in more and more water. And then that's a whole career becomes this pursuit of ambition, right? Because of the hole in the bucket. So how do you fix that hole in the bucket, right? It's hard, man. Hole in the bucket. I believe, for me at least, it is. I don't think I fundamentally am deserving of love, and I don't know why. I mean, I'll do another video what like theories, but it's nothing to do with the way people have treated me or being, not having my needs met. But there's something about just like this inability to just feel complete outside of achievement, the water. And I've been doing a few meditations. You might have heard of loving kindness meditation, metta, where it's really like you practice giving yourself love, which is, it's strange, man. Think about it. Have you ever felt love in your body? And I'm not talking about like an orgasm or climax, but just like being loved, right? Which leads to the next one. I can't imagine life without meditation. I've spoken about meditation, but like a decade, 40 minutes a day. And the way I just describe meditation, it's this ability to give yourself this warm hug whenever you need it. And it's just kind of like a hug from the soul. And I don't know when meditation came online for me, but I cannot imagine my life without it. And to go back to the point earlier about things being cheaper, I could easily see myself meditating 2 hours a day in the next 2 to 5 years. Number 41, try to be less counter dependent. So again, these are all related, but one of the things, I push people away emotionally, or I'm emotionally closed off. It might not seem this way because I'm actually very emotionally honest, I think, on this podcast. But I push people away emotionally because I think I have this fear that I'll be alone. And so there's independence and there's counter dependence. And counter dependence pushes people away so that they can never leave you. Right? So if you're always pushing people away, they can't leave you, right? Because you've pushed them away. And this is something I read about recently, and I was like, holy shit, I have traces of counter dependence. Number 42, still on the same point, feeling is cool. What do I mean by feeling is a lot of listeners, a lot of you watching this are going to say to yourself, I don't know what it's like to feel things in my body. This is a very common thing I hear people say. Very workaholic people. I don't know how to feel things in my body. Yes, because we're always working and coping and exercising. Exercising was one of the copes that I didn't mention, one that I'm quite good at. But we don't want to feel, right? And so what happens when you feel things in your body? What does stress feel like? Is it a punching sensation in your chest? Is it like having nails in your throat? Is it like someone twisting your abdomen, your obliques, right? What does stress feel like? What does joy feel like, right? What does peace feel like? Maybe is it tingling? If you've done NDMA, that's probably the time you've felt the most tingling in your forehead, in the front of your face, right? And believe me, when I think the last mile, so to speak, the thing that really moves you, change you, is like, especially for people like us, is learning how to feel. And I think I feel like I'm a toddler there. Like, kids probably know how to feel the best. Like they're so in their bodies, right? And that's something I'm really trying to come back to, get out of my head into my body, because there's so much wisdom there. Number 43, the middle way is the only way. I've been thinking about things that are objectively good, right? Like winning the lottery or being hot, right? Those are objectively good, or are they? Well, we know with lottery winners, I kind of primed the pump, like 70% end up broke. There's an article today about the Wall Street Journal, like one got fleeced by their financial advisors in fucking variable annuities, tax advantage variable annuities, even though they put all the money in a foundation. Anyway, objectively good things, being hot, like then the people will always be talking shit about you, right? People think that you got things easier because of your looks. Or the worst about being hot, so I've been told, is the inevitable day when you're not hot, right? Because it will happen. It happens to every single fucking one of us, right? And so these things, if there's nothing that's objectively good, then there can't be anything that's objectively bad either, even death and dying, right? Because when people lose a loved one, yeah, it sucks. But there's all these silver linings that come. It brings you more present. It refocuses you on what matters, and so on. So this middle way is just really, really special. Number 44, shedding leisure guilt. Enjoying my leisure is very hard, right? I've talked about it, time freedom. But what's time freedom if you're feeling guilty that you should be working? What's time freedom if you don't think it's okay to randomly take your kids to a water park during a work day, right? And it comes back to, where's that guilt coming from? That guilt's probably coming from these self-worth questions, right? This programming that you must always be productive, right? That's probably integrated into this sense of self, this sense of self-worth, this sense of identity, right? IFS, that's next week's video, or next solo video, will be on this topic. And last but not least, the 45th lesson, 45 years on this beautiful planet with incredible people like you, is there is one life design rule that rules them all. And that is pursue aliveness, right? It's a question I ask myself all the time. Does this make me come alive? Am I alive? Is this alive? Is aliveness coursing through my veins, right? It's hard to know aliveness, right? There's a presence to it. There's an energy to it. There is a love to it. There is enthusiasm, but it's not fabricated. There's a sustainability to it, right? But aliveness can't be measured. It's not just surfing, right? It's much more layered than, oh, that means surfing a lot. No, it's an energy that is found and lived and sat with and cultivated, like a practice of aliveness. And you all bring me so much aliveness. And I thank you all. And I hope you've enjoyed these 45 lessons.